This morning's speaker, I think you all know, Christian Baizan Solorzano. He's a designer, photographer, artist, and writer of the newsletter Beginner's Mind. Did I miss anything? There's quite a few other things there, right? He's also an empowered Zen life instructor, and he helps us with our marketing efforts here at ZLMC as well. And he's been practicing since 2018, and we're excited to have him here this morning to give a talk about compassion and loving kindness. So with that, we'll turn it over to you, Baizan.
All right, could everyone hear me online? Awesome. Great. Well, it's been a while since I've done one of these talks. I'm always a little bit nervous the first couple of minutes, but then it gets, I get a little bit more comfortable. So as Michael mentioned, today I'll be talking about loving kindness and compassion, which is something that we teach here at the Zen Center. So for anyone that's taken one of our classes, it's a theme that we tend to cover. And I've always had an issue with just the term loving kindness. One, because it sounds very, I don't know, I feel like it sounds a little bit silly. And it reminds me of, I think over the past 2 years, I've seen a lot of signs throughout Chicago that say, be kind. And I always find them a little bit ironic because I always interpret them as, you know, this nice statement that someone decided to put up and somehow that's going to change the world. So I find some irony with just the idea of just how trendy the word kind has become. And loving kindness is, and I'll sort of walk you guys through what the practice actually entails. But I find it to be one of the most, for me personally, one of the most difficult practices to work with. I think a big part of that is just as a result of my upbringing. As a child, I was always told that kindness or compassion or vulnerability was something somewhat of a weakness. So I still remember as a young boy, my mother telling me that, you know, you have to be tough. You can't open up because if you do, people will take advantage of that. And I think that's probably something that perhaps a lot of people have been just conditioned to believe. So I think that's probably a reason for my aversion to loving kindness, is because it's just been ingrained in my head that kindness is somewhat of a weakness. And I remember as a teenager, I discovered art and I discovered film and music. And I remember I was fascinated with the actor James Dean, particularly his film Rebel Without a Cause. And I remember just reading a lot about him on the internet and stumbling upon one of his quotes, which I don't know if he actually ever said this, but the quote was, only the gentle are ever really strong. And it was the first time that I actually heard, because I always associated gentleness and compassion and kindness with something that was a little bit more feminine. So to hear a man say only the gentle are ever really strong just made a huge impression on me. And it's something that to this day I continue to just think about. And I think over the years I've realized that whether he said it or not, I do think that there's some sort of strength and some sort of like rebellious attitude with the term, with such a phrase like that. And I've always had an issue with authority. I've always, ever since I was a kid, I've never been really fond of the idea that somehow because of something, teachers, governments, the police, they're somehow in charge of instilling some sort of authority. And I remember just thinking that, you know, this like rebellious attitude that I had as a child, I thought that to somehow be gentle was to succumb or to give in to this notion that you have to obey the rules. And it wasn't until recently that I actually realized that to be loving and to be kind and to be compassionate is probably one of the most rebellious acts that we could do, given the state of the world. Because if we look around, it's very easy to see that like hatred, violence, aggression is sort of the norm. And by day, so throughout the week, I work as a consultant at a large consulting firm. So I'm exposed to a lot of business, and I'm exposed to a lot of the way that companies try to target their consumers. And even the word that I just used, target, I find an issue with, because I've noticed that corporate jargon is something that never really sits well with me. And it wasn't until a few weeks ago, actually, that I stumbled upon a company that on their website, they very explicitly mention that they're a company that is not going to adopt the language of war and violence. And they go a little bit more into some specifics, and they share some of the metaphors that we typically associate with business. So I'll share with some of you guys some of them. But we talk about conquering the markets, targeting customers and consumers, destroying competition, making a killing, something I always hear, killing two birds with one stone. And somehow we've adopted this notion that if we do any of these things, that's where success lies. And it just doesn't, to me, like just logically, it doesn't make any sense. Why do we want to target customers? Like the idea of using the word target seems a little bit strange. Destroying competition, again, just competition in general. Like, why do we need to compete? What are we competing for? If you go to the grocery store, you will see that there's so many different brands for ketchup, for instance. Yeah, they probably all taste the same, have the same ingredients, yet when we go to the grocery store, we're confronted with so many options. And for me, that kind of stuff just really stresses me out. And it's the kind of stuff that keeps me up at night, is just thinking about why are there so many kinds of breads? Why are there so many kinds of waters? And I get that there's dietary differences, and I appreciate the diversity in different types of products. But I think just this notion of competition and, being at the top and wanting to be the best, for me, it just goes against a lot of what we practice in Buddhism, which is interdependence, which is loving kindness, which is compassion. So growing up, just being told to be a fighter and to, stand up for what you believe in, I actually think that that's probably, as I'm hearing myself talk about this right now, I actually think that's one of the reasons why, as a teenager, like I had a lot of, I was the kind of student that was always getting suspended. There was a year where every single day I had detention. I remember I used to get in trouble for chewing gum in class, and the teacher, if you chewed gum in class, she would make you write what was called a gum sheets. So she would give you this sheet of paper that explained the history of gum in a very small font, and you had to pretty much rewrite it. And for every day that you didn't turn it in, you'd have to do it again. And I remember there was a time where I had to do, something like 10 of these sheets. And you're just writing over and over and over again this thing. And I remember just thinking to myself, like, she's probably not going to read this. So in my gum sheet, I'm going to toss in some like curse words directed at her. So if she does read it, she'll know how I feel about her. And I remember going to class and turning this like big stack of papers, and her telling me just go throw them in the garbage, and I remember just like being so upset, and I think just thinking about this right now, like, just makes me, it continues to like upset me. And I think it's just because I think in life, like authority and just the way that we grow up, isn't always the most, we're not presented with the right conditions to always be well. So this is sort of my upbringing. When I talk about this kind of stuff, that's sort of the context in which I'm speaking. So I think, as I mentioned, when I started practicing Zen, one of the things that I really appreciate about it is that everything was very direct and to the point. There was no fluff, there was no fanciness. I always associate Zen with just a bright white room where like you could sort of see everything. There's nothing that could hide. When we sit in meditation, through the silence, everything almost becomes like amplified. So your thoughts sort of become a little bit louder. So, so I would say over the past 3 years or so, I discovered just this practice of loving kindness. And so loving kindness, for those of you that are not familiar, it's a form of meditation that is very simple. And I'll walk you guys through a little demonstration towards the end. But I remember when I first heard about loving kindness, it was a little bit difficult because when we do meditation, we always, even the way we teach it, we sometimes present it as an antidote to stress, to anxiety, to any negative feelings. So there's always this sort of outcome that we desire. Whereas with loving kindness, you're wishing benevolence upon other people, but there is no way for you to actually know whether that person is actually going to get better or not. So in your home, you might be directing loving kindness to, someone that's on the other side of the world, and perhaps they're sick, or even for example, during our Buddhist services, when we're reading from the sick list, we're wishing health and well-being upon these people that many of us don't even know. And the chances of them actually getting better because we're here chanting, who knows, they might not. But I think what these practices teach us is we're training the mind to open up to the possibility that through us, through our words, through our thoughts, we could actually generate and direct compassion towards other people. Which I think if for example, if you're coming to our Sunday morning services and you are, listening to the names of the sick and the deceased, and you're practicing in a room together, perhaps throughout the week when you encounter, a coworker or a friend or a neighbor that are sick, you might find it a little bit easier to, direct some compassion towards them because you sort of had your workout on a Sunday, so it'll hopefully be easier. So loving kindness in Sanskrit, it translates to metta. And metta, in a dictionary that I was able to get a hold of, the attributes for metta are friendly, amicable, benevolence, affectionate, kind, goodwill, love, sympathy. And loving kindness is referred to as something that counters ill will. And as you know, in Zen, in Buddhism, there's no shortage of lists. There's lists for just about everything. So loving kindness is part of what in Buddhism are called the Brahma Vihara, the Brahma Vihara, or the 4 divine abidings. And in that list of 4, there's loving kindness, there's compassion, empathic joy, which translates to delighting in other people's joy, which is pretty cool, I think. Equanimity, which is stability to face the world. So in today's talk, I'll mostly be focusing on the first 2. But I do want to cover empathic joy because yesterday I was preparing for this talk. I just thought of how beautiful this notion of delighting in other people's joy. And it goes back to what I was talking about in the beginning of, companies and competition and just these words that we use when we're talking about those things. We use a lot of vocabulary that is violent and just plagued with war and killing birds and all this kind of stuff. So just imagine if you had a business where you actually wanted your competitors to succeed. That would be so strange, and I don't know if it's ever happened, but I wonder what would happen if it did. Perhaps there might be new innovations, where there might be new discoveries if all the ketchup companies got together to figure out how to make the best ketchup, or maybe they realize that, I don't know, that's the thing, like there's so much that we don't know because we're so wrapped up with this, yes, pursuing joy, but it's always our own joy. And I think as long as we have this individualistic mindset of just looking out for ourselves, that's not going to be very helpful. And I think if you look around, it's very easy to see that a lot of the injustice in the world comes from this me, my, I, self. So empathic joy, I think, is great. I think it's a practice. Equanimity, again, another thing that comes up in our practice. When we sit, we're practicing equanimity because we're, opening up to face the world. So I think of loving kindness as a practice that opens your heart. You could almost think about it as if you have like a big block of clay or mud. Over the years, that block gets hard and it becomes very susceptible to cracks, might become very fragile, dusty, gray. So loving kindness is sort of a practice that waters that clay, that waters that mud. And it makes us more, more flexible, more open. And when we harden our hearts, that usually happens because something in our life happened. It's sort of like an automatic response. So if you think about, like for example, I have a dog, and there are certain things that he doesn't like to do. So like, for example, sometimes if I take out the hairbrush, he will flinch, or he'll sort of, he knows that he needs to go hide because he doesn't like the way the brush feels on his skin. Or he also doesn't like to take a shower. So if he sees that the water's running and that we're like gathering the shampoo, he sort of starts to flinch, and he'll like go hide under the bed or something. So if he's been conditioned now to believe that, showers are not a happy place. So what do we have to do? We have to get the treats out, sort of manipulate him into the bathroom, and sort of try to do it as quick as possible. So throughout our life, we sort of become like, these scared dogs or these creatures that flinch. So if you hear a loud bang, that might scare you because it reminds you of something. Or if you hear, if you smell something, or if you hear a voice, or if you see something that triggers you, we close up. And when we close up, that's usually when we limit ourselves, and when we limit our possibilities, when we, live a life that is not up to our potential. So we become jaded, or we might believe that we deserve those situations. So perhaps, I don't know, something that really scares you because it's become so familiar, you're going to be finding yourself always in those situations because that's perhaps what you think you deserve or what you think is the only thing that you know. And there is some, some benefit to not hardening our hearts, but to being able to distinguish a situation that is probably unsafe. So when we're children, if we have children, we always tell kids to not trust strangers, because we see, we might have heard about something in the news where something terrible happened to a child, or we teach our friends or family members to just be careful because we know that the world is an ugly place. But when we become so accustomed, when we just believe so strongly that just everything is horrible, that's also not very, very, very skillful or very helpful. So loving kindness is really a practice. And we practice sort of like we practice anything else. We might practice a new language, we might exercise, we might practice an instrument. It's something that takes practice. And chances are, if you've ever practiced the act of loving other people or loving a stranger or loving your enemy or being kind to someone that you disagree with, and if you find it somewhat challenging, that's probably a sign that you probably need to practice this more. Sort of like if you're playing the piano and everything that you create sounds terrible, that's sort of a sign that, you need to practice. So what does loving kindness look like? So we have historical figures to look at. So we might think Jesus is an example of someone that was very loving and kind. The Buddha is certainly a person that we associate with infinite compassion. Or we might look at more contemporary people. We might think of first responders, volunteers, people that just throw themselves headfirst into the fire without really expecting anything in return, but to just save people or sentient beings. The people that make this place run, they exert loving kindness. So people that run the circles, the people that, show up in the mornings to ring the bell, those are examples of loving kindness. Yet somehow, when we think of people like, for example, Martin Luther King or Thich Nhat Hanh, we see these people as almost otherworldly, or we look at them as someone that they're just so high up that there's just no way that we could ever be like them. So we might, read their books, or we might admire them or watch their videos. But with this belief that somehow they're just an impossible person that we could ever be like. And I think through our practice, we're encouraged to sit like the Buddha. We're encouraged to take the posture of the Buddha. We're encouraged to, recite the Bodhisattva vows and to chant, to read sutras. And we're always, encouraged to, see ourselves as a Buddha, to see ourselves as enlightened beings, which is one of the reasons why I just love this practice so much, is because it actually makes you believe that, you're no different than the Buddha, that the Buddha is in you. So I just really love that. So when we practice loving kindness, when we're able to generate generosity towards other people, we're sort of teaching ourselves that we too could be like Jesus or the Buddha or these great people that we always hear of. There's a story that I recently, as I was prepping for this talk, there's a psychologist, Tara Brach, who many of you might be familiar with, but she was telling this story about how in Asia, in Eastern Asia, there was this Buddha statue. It wasn't very beautiful, but it survived centuries. So due to its strength, people just admire this statue because of its durability. And this was probably a few decades ago, but because of a dry season, the statue just started to crack. And as it was beginning to crack, the monks that were nearby, they started to get a little bit curious. So they started to shine flashlights into the cracks to sort of see what was in there and sort of to understand the structure and to figure out, like, how did this statue manage to survive for so long? And then all of a sudden, it started to crack. And what the monks realized was that when they started to shine the flashlight, there was a reflection that was coming from inside this, this huge statue. And what was inside looked a little bit more beautiful than the facade of the statue. So they started to sort of crack at it, and they realized that within this plaster was actually a much more beautiful statue that was made of gold. And apparently the reason why, centuries ago they decided to cover up this statue with this, I don't know, like some sort of clay, was because back then a lot of, like, I guess, bandits would like break into these like caves or sacred temples, and they would steal things. So what they did is just they covered this beautiful statue with something that wasn't very pretty, but still, for the people that were around, they knew what was underneath. So, Tara Brach, the way that she described the statue was actually, I thought, pretty powerful, because she mentions that in a lot of ways, we all have this gold in us. We all have this beautiful statue that we have housed deep inside, but somehow we're afraid, and we cover it up. And we cover it up, and that takes the shape of, it might be how we compose ourselves around other people, or how we act, or the kind of relationships that we find ourselves in, or the way that we exist. We sort of have encrusted ourselves in this not so beautiful cast. So loving kindness is just this reminder that deep inside of us, deep inside all of us, we have this this beautiful shining gold. And I think, just if you just sit with that for a little bit, that's just such a beautiful thing to think about, is just having this beauty that we're born with. It's very easy to love like innocent things like animals, babies, because there's some purity to that. But as we get older, naturally we just sort of start putting on different casts, where all of a sudden we look in the mirror and we don't really know who we are. So does that make sense so far? Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to walk you guys through, let me look at the time. Yep, we have time. So I'm going to walk all of you through a little bit of what this practice looks like. It's very simple. The instructions are very simple. But for a lot of you, I know for myself, it feels sometimes very unnatural. So the instructions go like this. So you're going to think about, so the way it works is you direct loving kindness towards four people: yourself, someone you love, someone that's neutral, and someone that you might not like or you might consider an enemy. And the reason why you start with yourself is because if we're able to be compassionate or to be self-aware of the areas that we need to work on, it makes it a little bit more easier to direct on other people. So it's sort of like that saying goes is before you can love someone else, you first have to love yourself. So loving kindness works in the same way. So before you could love other people or direct loving kindness to others, you sort of have to learn to do it with yourself. So, let's start by practicing this. So I'm going to ask you to sort of put both feet on the ground, and similar to when we practice meditation, you're going to find a way to just get in a comfortable position. You could close your eyes, or you could keep your eyes open. But you're going to repeat the following, and you don't have to say it out loud. And I'll say it first, and then sort of you could do it by yourself in your mind. And we'll do this for, I don't know, like 3 minutes or so. So you'll start by saying, "May I be safe." And in your mind, you could just follow after me. So, may I be safe. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be at peace. You could just sit with that for a few minutes. If you want to, you could recite it in your mind. And just pay attention to what comes up. And now, you're going to think about someone you love. Now you're going to say, "May," you'll insert their name. So may they be safe. May they be happy. May they be healthy. May they be at peace. Now we're going to move on to a neutral person. So someone that you don't really have any feelings for. Perhaps you don't even know their name, but you see them every day. It can be your person that delivers the mail, You're going to say, may they be safe. May they be happy. May they be healthy. May they be at peace. Now the last person is going to be your someone that you don't like. So it could be someone that I don't know, someone that you don't care for, someone that hurt you. You're gonna say, may they be safe. May they be happy. May they be healthy. May they be at peace. For this last person, just you find it a little bit difficult or unnatural, or you almost feel like you're lying to yourself, it's okay. All right. So I'm very curious to hear about how did that feel for people? Was it just how was that experience? I remember the first time I did this, it just felt very just funny to say that in my mind.
Excuse me. The first time I remember saying these words out loud with a group, I couldn't say the words. They just, and I was feeling kind of uncomfortable. And it took me some time to be able to at least mouth the words. and later I wondered about that, and it seemed fake, it seemed dishonest. But as you know, as you've been talking, I've been going over the changes in myself about looking at and seeing how I've changed, and this whole idea of a Buddha nature within me. And I think this is part of the process. And so I'm grateful, even though I wasn't conscious of all this stuff going on inside. So
I remember for me it felt fake as well. It felt like I was just reading off of something. But surprisingly, I've noticed myself in situations where I think it's almost like muscle memory. If you practice these things, when you run into a situation where you're confronted with an enemy or just someone that you don't like, I don't know. I think like it feels like it takes the pressure off when you're able to direct some goodwill towards them, and I don't know. It just does something. Yeah.
I think all of these are interesting. I mean, all the different persons are interesting. I think the enemy one is obviously interesting in its own way, particularly the wishing that the person be safe, because I think with an enemy, it's actually I want someone to get that person. No, but then actually moving to the other pieces about wishing them to be happy and healthy and be at peace, then sort of makes me think, well, there may be, if they were more at peace, then maybe they would, this sounds instrumental, but, no, but seriously, maybe if they were happier or more at peace, then maybe they would feel more safe. And then maybe they would behave in a way which was less about making other people feel unsafe and things like that. So it's interesting to kind of think about all the different dimensions of this, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, maybe they would earn a spot on your love list. Maybe they would. Anyone else online?
Well, one of the things that I noticed this time is that when I say these things, these people, these four different people kind of blend together. And I see that it's the feelings that I have about them that are false.
Mm-hmm.
It's not them. They are me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the feelings that I have about them are the things which are kind of like the clay. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah, it's yeah, those yeah, usually I think, like, for example, in the case of, practicing this towards someone that you're not very fond of, you sort of realize, like, all the sticky parts that they've, like, you're just covered in this, like, stickiness that you've placed there, like it's your own doing, and it's your own I don't know, like, attachment to this idea of that person. And I think this is just a great way to sort of detach and let go. And I think it just, yeah, it could feel a little bit liberating, because I don't know, you could say it's a process of forgiving or moving on or letting go. Yeah. Robin?
Christian, I really liked how I felt doing it. Like something felt loosened up or really warm inside my body, particularly in terms of someone I have difficulty with. So thank you for taking us through that. It's a great exercise.
Yeah. There is a there's another story that I heard somewhere, and it was about who was it? It was I think it was like Jack Cornfield was talking about this, and he said that I don't know if it was him or someone else, but some guy got robbed at gunpoint, and the guy with the gun was like, "Give me all your money," like, and he like gave him all his money. He's like, "All right, like, what else do you got?" He's like, "Well, here's my watch. Here's like my credit cards. Like, here, take everything." And he's like, "But please don't shoot me. Like, you already got everything. Like, you did a good job. Like, you accomplished what you set out to do. Like, you should go tell all your friends about it. Like, you were very successful." And the guy just couldn't believe it. Like, he just robbed someone, and the person you robbed is now telling you that you did a good job. And I think this is sort of kind of like that. I mean, that's an extreme, but you're sort of I don't know, telling yourself like good job, or you're teaching yourself this idea that you could that you too are capable of goodness. So that's just a story that always sticks to my head, is when we practice this, we're doing something good, so something to think about. Anyone else?
Thank you, Baizan. That was really a beautiful image. The image of the golden Buddha, you know, encrusted with this clay, and kind of imagining that everyone has that potentiality. Everyone has that Buddha nature, and you know, the more we allow it to be hidden, it really doesn't serve anybody. It really doesn't allow us to shine forth and to be able to bestow benevolence or good feelings or goodwill. And I think even with, you know, the fourth person that can give us we feel a lot of difficulty towards, look for the gold inside.
Yeah.
It's really there. It's there. What, you know, what obscures it are, you know, our delusions, our the casts that we have worn and that we take on. So thank you. That was just a lovely, lovely visualization. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, one of the things that I find really alarming is the fact that our culture tends to champion people that are casted up. So if you have a closed heart, that might make you more competitive, more aggressive, and by society's standards, might make you a winner. You know. And that's just a scary thought, that sometimes we celebrate and we give the spotlight to the people that are, I don't know, most troubled, or the ones that are not really looking out for us. So that's a scary thought, and that's something that I'm always trying to challenge as someone that often finds themselves in a situation where there's a lot of hierarchy and a lot of power, and it's sort of like this accepted notion that, you know, the people at the top, they could sort of get away with anything because they're louder, or they're bigger, or they're you know, they never take no for an answer. So I think it's up to us to sort of challenge and yeah, just, I don't know, like, practice loving kindness. Like I said, like, I think that's one of it's a strength, and it goes back to the James Dean quote, only the gents were ever really strong. Like, I think that's true strength is gentleness. Yeah.
I'm curious, Christian, what is the culture in where you work? How would your coworkers feel if they were here listening to you today?
I mean, this is gonna go on YouTube, right? So I gotta be careful with what I say. No, I mean, I'm very lucky because I work with a really awesome team. So I think, I mean, yeah, the people that I work with are they're just incredible human beings, and I think over the past few years, I've actually seen an improvement where more companies and corporations are recognizing that the way to innovate and the way to function is through things like, you know, talking about these topics, talking about social justice, talking about diversity and inclusion. So I actually think that we're going in the right direction. I still think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I'm just very hopeful for the new generation of people that are like getting out of college right now. I think there's I don't know, I feel like people are just more socially conscious, and they're more aware of issues. So I don't know, I think if they were here, they'd probably contribute to the conversation and make it even better. So yeah.
Know when to quit. Question. Know when to quit. Know when to quit.
Great. Awesome.
Thank you for that wonderful talk, Christian. Thank you. It was wonderful.
Christian, it was fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Robin. Thanks everyone for joining.
Everybody wave.